Our next speaker is the Prime Minister of Turkey. And I'm extremely pleased, Mr. Prime Minister, and I welcome you and your delegation, your foreign minister who has been here before, and other members, defense minister, other members of the delegation. You were in Berlin before, and we were speaking earlier today about the Turkish-German situation and the opportunities which have been created to improve our relationships. So there is a lot of attention focused on your presence here in Germany and here in Munich. So please, sir, join us and speak to this audience. Thank you.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be here to address about security matters in the region where we are situated. If you don't mind, I will go with Turkish. Translation will be available. It is more convenient for me to speak up our native language. Well, is a historical one. I think we are 54th time all over the world people are coming and discussing security matters. Dolayısıyla
the Munich Security Conference this year, I believe, as compared to the previous year, has become even more important. And the reason is the following. Since last year, when we look around the world as far as security is concerned, and as far as anti-terrorism is concerned, and when it comes to refugees, have we improved? Or rather, has the situation become even more serious? This is what we should have a look at. Within the last 7 years, 911 kilometers long borderline between Turkey and Syria. Along these borders, there is a big civil war now. Initially, at the beginning of my remarks, let me candidly share with you the following. Turkey is not the triggering factor of this war, and we didn't cause this war either. As far as this war is concerned, Turkey is a country which is directly impacted by the outcomes of this war. And Turkey is one of those rare countries in that position. You can add to this Lebanon and Jordan as well. But the thing is, this is a human tragedy that is being experienced here, and Turkey is the #1 country which has to shoulder the worst burden here. Within the last years, 3.5 million people fled their countries to save their lives. They had to leave their homes. So these 3.5 million people came to Turkey. We have been hosting them, and we have been sharing our livelihood, our bread and houses with them. And in order for them to be able to hold on to life, we are conducting all sorts of sacrifices. That is one aspect of the matter. Now, that is something that our own culture and tradition and history would normally require us to do in terms of the kinds of values that we have normally, not because some other people want us to do. On the other hand, distinguished guests, looking at the region, there is this incredible struggle in the region. It's a formidable struggle. Daesh, the whole world is focusing on Daesh, but the struggle, the fight there and terrorism there is not only limited to Daesh only. How is the fight against Daesh conducted? There is the coalition, there is Russia, there is Turkey, there is Iran, and there are more than 70 countries involved. We are fighting against Daesh. And who are we facing? 5,000 or 6,000 or at most perhaps 10,000 people, militia, who are armed. And where do we stand in this fight? In real terms, who is actually, in real terms, conducting this fight? It would be useful to have a look at this. Let me just give you one example. Through the Euphrates Shield operation, together with this operation, in the region, Turkey has decapacitated and eliminated 3,600 Daesh members. In this area, which covers 2,000 square kilometers, 1,035,000 Syrians went back to that region. 160,000 children have been able to go back to school. Health institutions, facilities, schools have been reopened. Trade has restarted. A police force has been established, and there is now some security. And 135,000 out of that 3.5 million from Turkey went back. And who ensured this? Turkey did. But did we suffice with this? When it comes to Iraq, as far as the fight against Daesh is concerned, only around Mosul, 800 Daesh organization members were decapacitated, eliminated by Turkey directly, without being a part of the coalition necessarily. Now, is it all limited to this? Of course not. Let me now share with you some figures, if you allow me. This is really important when it comes to understanding how dangerous Daesh is for our region and for Europe. Now, in Turkish prisons currently, the number of Daesh member detained people is 10,000 people, and I'm rounding figures here. 5,800 foreign fighters have been so far sent back from our borders. We didn't let them in. Where do you think they came from? They come from European countries. They come from these countries. And also, 4,000 suspected people, we stopped them from entering the country. And 56,300 potential people who we thought could be potentially affiliated with Daesh, we issued a ban on them to enter from our borders. So what did this serve? It ensured that the activities of Daesh in the region was reduced. Human bombs in Turkey and collective massacre activities have been reduced and limited. And at the same time, the chances for these people to penetrate and spread into Europe has also been reduced. But in spite of all these, the threat still continues. It hasn't ended. Why not? Let me explain. The United States, they have been cooperating with PYD-YPG. In an attempt to eradicate Daesh, they have been working. As a matter of fact, some of you in this room do know this, and some of you may not. As a matter of fact, PYD-YPG is the branch in Syria of a terrorist organization that Turkey has been fighting against for 4 decades now. They are one and the same. They are the same terrorist organization. In northern Iraq, as a result of Turkey's effective fight and struggle, those terrorist elements could not hold on. And through Sinjar now, they have been moving towards the east of Euphrates into Syria. And these people are Kurds, Arabs, Turkomans, Yazidis. I mean, these innocent people, these groups of innocent people, are being dominated by these terrorists. Now, of course, we're talking about two NATO members, namely the US and Turkey. What are we doing? In fact, what we're doing in real terms is protecting the borders of NATO. The borders of NATO is the southern borders of Turkey. As we protect the borders of NATO, that's us. Along with that, another NATO member, what they are doing is they are cooperating with a terrorist organization who constitutes a threat against our country and borders on the pretext of fighting against Daesh, and we have a hard time understanding this. When we talk about this with our friends, they tell us the following: this is an obligation, not an option on our part, they say. Currently, when it comes to Syria and Iraq, and the number of Daesh members there is at a minimum level in Deir ez-Zor and in the southwest of Baghdad, in the south of Kirkuk, there is some, and the total number of those members is around 3,000. Now, of course, they all must be eliminated. That is something we agree on. But while doing this, we should not be creating another new terrorist organization. If we want a lasting peace in Syria, and if we want a future in Syria where people are not armed and where Arabs, Kurds, Turkomans, Yazidis, all the different ethnic groups in Syria, Nusranis, all these ethnic groups in Syria who have not been involved in armed conflict, if we want them to coexist, then we should look at the process of Sochi and Astana, which is about ceasefire and de-escalation. And later on, with the preparation of a new constitution in Geneva, all the coalition member countries and the permanent representatives of the UN, Russia, Iran, Turkey, i.e. the main players, will take part in a conference in Geneva. Then a lasting solution must be found within these limits. And this is an urgency because today the number of refugees who live outside of Syria is more than the total population of Syria. Turkey, on the one hand, is fighting against Daesh, and at the same time, the other three terrorist organizations are also being fought against. One of them is PKK, and YPG, PYD is an extension of PKK. Another terrorist organization is the FETÖ terrorist organization. On the 15th of July 2016, we experienced a coup attempt. As a result of this, we have been fighting against FETÖ terrorist organization. And it has been obviously understood that this is a serious threat not only for Turkey, but for other countries of the world as well. And today we see that they are active in European countries. Dear guests, of course, when it comes to solving problems, it's not only about eliminating members of terrorist organizations. We have to go down to the root causes. Now, it was first Al-Qaeda, then it became Al-Nusra, then it became Daesh. And what is next? What will be the next name? We don't know. Nobody can guarantee. Then, the solution is, now, of course, as far as terrorism is concerned, we shouldn't make any difference. We should never say but. And we shouldn't have a prejudice such as terrorists always come from Muslim countries. We should, of course, continue with this fight against terrorism, but at the same time, we should focus on the root causes triggering terrorism. The UN should get involved, particularly the strong 5 permanent members of the UN must be focusing more on this in an attempt to look into the future of the region, to come up with a more participatory and just system for more democracy in the region, for more fair distribution of resources in the region. They must focus more on this. For this, we must work more together. I understand that, from Mr. Singer that my time is almost up. I think the remaining part of my time will be devoted to questions and answers, and I will be able to entertain your questions. So all in all, more democracy, more human rights, and a better framework where we hear the voices of local communities more. So with these sentiments in mind, I hope... Oh, by the way, one last comment. Turkey ensures the security of Europe. And how does she do that? Now, 2 years ago, on a daily basis, in average, we had 2,500 refugees coming from the region into Europe. Today, this number has gone down below 70 people per day. What does this mean? This means that we are keeping refugees there in the region, and terrorists who penetrate into those people cannot now come to Europe and damage societal peace in Europe. We want this to be acknowledged and appreciated. In NATO, we are effectively working and fulfilling our duties. I thank you all for your patience.
Prime Minister, we have time for just a few questions. So I'm looking, oh yes, I see all sorts of hands go up. Let's go to there's a lady, if I see correctly, here in the middle. Yes, please.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. I already introduced myself before. Heike Hensle, Member of Parliament.
Ja, eine Frage.
I have one question regarding your relations to the US. President Erdogan has threatened an Ottoman slap. The relations do not seem to be the best.
Is it on? Yeah, it's working.
Können Sie uns dazu ein paar Sätze sagen?
Maybe you can comment on that, how this should be interpreted, and what this means for the situation in the north of Syria.
Let me propose to collect 2 or 3 questions and then go back.
Okay.
Yes, the gentleman. Yes, please.
Alexander Neu, Die Linke im Deutschen Bundestag.
Alexander Neu, the Left Party, the German party. As far as I know, the Syrian government did not invite Syria to undertake military operations in Syria. How can you explain the offensive in Afrin in terms of international law?
Herr Premierminister, mein Name ist Gunther.
Prime Minister, my name is Gunther Kriechbaum. I am the chairman of the Committee on European Affairs. We do recognize that Turkey gives refuge to millions of refugees, but there are other things that we cannot accept. Yesterday, the arrest of Deniz Yücel was ended. He was released, and we welcome that. But we also have to note that there are still more than 150 journalists sitting in Turkish prisons, often without being charged. Without freedom of the media, no freedom of speech. Without freedom of speech, no democracy. Now, if Turkey is striving to have an open relationship with countries that are governed by the rule of laws, you would be well advised to give the freedom of speech and media the room that they need.
Yes. Questions. The first question was about our president. As far as our fight against terrorism in Syria is concerned, he said something along the lines of an Ottoman slap. This was what the first question was about. Distinguished guests, imagine a country. For years, along its borders, this country has been exposed to terrorism through its borders, and this country has lost 40,000 of its people on this path. At a time where things were sort of eventually on track in Iraq, then in Syria, as we were conducting a fight against Daesh, we had to face another terrorist organization and its sponsors. So what were we supposed to do? They were harassing our country. They were killing people. Would we expected or supposed to turn a blind eye to that? Could we possibly be expected to do that? What we mean is the following. Be it in Syria, be it in Iraq, if any terrorist action is conducted against our country, we would conduct and put a slap, the most fierce slap on the face. This is what is meant. We're not conducting a war against any country. There is not a war in Syria as we speak. In Syria, it's just that there is a fight against terrorism currently. And this is not a fight which is conducted by Turkey only. There are 62 coalition member countries who are conducting this, including Russia, Iran, and Turkey. We are a part of NATO, and we are within the coalition, and we provide air support to the coalition. And in NATO, through our NATO bases, we help out with the operations. It wouldn't make sense to move this out of track. And if, of course, there is a country out there who decides to engage in war, of course we would retaliate, although this would not be something desirable. Currently, what's taking place is a fight against terrorism. And we have already put a bad slap on the face, an Ottoman slap on the faces of these terrorist organizations, and we have already crippled them. But now they have taken a new name. And unfortunately, as they reappeared under a new name, they weren't alone. They have been using the weapons of the US and Russia, and these weapons have been either directly provided or they have been obtained through illegitimate means, and these weapons, arms, are being used against people. Do you know today that in Syria, arms of many countries are being sold over the internet, and terrorist organizations are purchasing these weapons? What kind of a fight against terrorism is this? Somebody, please explain this. Another question was, the rule of law in Turkey is being questioned. Journalists being behind bars, Deniz Yücel was released, and the others should be released, etc. Now, Turkey is a state of law, just like Germany, just like the United States of America. No one has the right of questioning the state of law in another country. Now, let me ask you the following question. There are 3,063 detained and convicted people behind bars in Germany, people of Turkish origin. Why are they behind bars? Obviously, there must be some charges against them. But we would want is to have these people tried before courts and come up with a final verdict about them. So the duty that we should fulfill is to leave the judiciary alone and to just have them give decisions, judicial verdicts. And if the processes are slow, legal regulations can be conducted in an attempt to expedite such processes, and it is the Parliament's duty to do that. We should have the Parliament work on this, amend laws, and to expedite legal proceedings. It is our duty. In 2016, we experienced a coup attempt. 250 people died. 2,193 people were injured severely. They lost their arms, their legs. And they did all this with our own jet fighters, with our own tanks, with our own arms. They had seized the weapons of the Turkish army, and that terrorist organization today is being protected. The head of this terrorist organization who had given those instructions. Now, unfortunately, no legal proceedings have been initiated against him. Now, the members of the audience today in this room, imagine if the parliament in your country gets to be bombed. Imagine in your countries, if your prime minister or president is tried to be killed, what would you do? How would you take it? Of course, for the security of our country and of our people, we take all necessary measures. And we will strengthen our democracy. And when it comes to our practices of a state of law, we will improve them. And we won't act with a sense of revenge. We will act with a sense of justice in an attempt to find solution to these problems. But the thing is, when our friends make interpretations, we expect them to be fairer and to empathize with what we have gone through. What we have gone through, I mean, if any other nation was to experience the same for a whole decade, they wouldn't be able to put their act together again. But the heroic Turkish nation acted as shields against those arms, and they put an end to this malicious coup attempt. There was another question. Oh, okay. The whole issue of Syria and permission. Now, dear friends, I mean, those other countries who are currently in Syria, which one of them got permission? Tell me. I mean, there is no state as we speak, and there are 62 countries in fighting against terrorism. Yet, our legitimacy takes us to the UN, takes us to Article number 51. For fight against terrorism, the Article 51 of the UN Charter gives us this duty. And the UN resolution numbered 1624. Please, I mean, this is the Security Council resolution of the UN. Please do open it up and read. It clearly states that if a country faces a serious threat, it will take necessary measures. And in Article 51, it says, when it comes to combating terrorism, countries have a right to self-defense, legitimate defense, until which time the United Nations mobilizes a peace force to that area. Therefore, everything that we do is in compliance with international law and is in compliance with legitimacy as well. Now, do you know what we're doing? Actually, what we're doing is in Afrin, people who have been dislocated, they have lost their homes, they have lost their property, their women have been raped. We are clearing that region from this heinous terrorist organization. In Raqqa, after the region was cleared off from Daesh, the Daesh organization there moved to Afrin, as it was. And as we speak, they are fighting against us. They are in clash against us in Afrin. In Afrin, we're not only fighting against PKK, PYD, and YPG, but also against Daesh. And the purpose is to make sure that people there can possibly move back to their homes. Thank you.
Very much, Prime Minister. I know that if we had more time, there would be dozens of more questions. I would like to invite the audience to offer a round of applause, and thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.